the Wilford Hill Crematorium in Nottingham. A family gathers to say their goodbyes. All things come to an end, and it's important to say goodbye, to remember the departed, and to do it in a formal, ceremonial way. It's not just about giving the deceased a decent send-off, it's also about those left behind, giving the living a moment of reflection before life moves on.
I heard a voice from heaven saying, "Great things, happier the dead who die in the faith of Christ."
But there's another side to all this, a side that we don't get to see, that we don't really want to see.
I don't know, is Gary about?
And that's what we're going to be looking at here. We're going behind the scenes.
If you see him, will you tell him I'm going over to the mortuary?
With Matthew Limrose.
Thanks, David. OK, gents.
Right, I'll follow you.
Yeah?
Matthew is a fifth-generation member of A.W. Lim, a family firm of funeral directors in Nottingham. Those working alongside Matthew include his father, Nigel, and Nigel's sister, Jackie.
When someone dies, there is no choice. A method of disposal, putting it crudely, is necessary.
Me being in a family business whereby we were dealing with death all the time, it was just part of our life. It's what we grew up with.
We are looking after the body. We're the custodians of that deceased in the run-up to the funeral, and we're ensuring that they are laid to rest in the right way.
Many of us may have seen the occasional dead body before, usually a relative or close family friend. But for the likes of Nigel, Jackie and Matthew, it's a completely different experience. Every year, their firm handles 3,500 funerals. This is dealing with death in quantity. The day begins with the first of 2 runs to the hospital mortuary.
We're going into a real situation. We've got 5 deceased that we need to collect.
Yes.
Obviously, we're going to be in very close quarters with them. We need to lift them onto our equipment. How comfortable are you with actually being there when all of that happens?
Matthew, I don't know.
Okay.
I really
that's a good, honest answer, really. I obviously don't want to put you in a position where you're uncomfortable with anything. So I think that what will happen when we arrive is we'll come into the mortuary. It's an environment a bit like this, but the mortuary doors will all be closed, so you won't necessarily see any bodies, and then you can sort of make that decision.
Good morning.
Gary.
How'd you do? I'm Alan D. How'd you do?
Okay. Shall we go?
Yeah, thank you very much. The vehicles they use are specially adapted people carriers with space for 5 passengers in the back, but horizontally and on 2 levels. While we make our way across Nottingham, let's meet more of the family. Much of its history hangs on the walls of their head office, early 20th century invoices, old glass signage and numerous framed photographs.
So how old are you there? That's December 97, so I'll have just had my 15th birthday one.
Right.
Yeah, I look 15 on that, I look about 10.
Well, I'm Jackie Limrose. I'm a 4th generation funeral director and I'm a director of the company.
I'm Nigel Limrose, managing... Let's start again, because that's already changed in the last week.
This is also a story of one generation handing over to the next, a challenge for all family firms.
I'm Nigel Limrose, Chief Executive of A.W. Lim, the Family Funeral Service, dating back to 1907, when we first carried out funerals for the local community.
And there's the family, photographed.
So we're going back in time because there's a very young-looking Matthew there. But in the centre is Nigel, father, and Penny, my mother. And then beside Penny is my sister Chloe.
And although Matthew calls himself my big brother, he is actually the younger one.
Alongside her is my grandfather, George. George is Dad's father, but George actually married into the business. So although for a long time he was the face of our family business, George is a Limrose by marriage because he's actually a Rose. And then on the opposite side of the picture next to me is my grandmother Sheila, who is the granddaughter of the founder, A.W. Lim.
Arthur William Lim was a general dealer and mangle manufacturer. He had an office next door to Jesse Boot on Goosegate.
Boots the chemist.
Boots the chemist, indeed, yes. Boots the dispensing chemist, I think they actually were. Next door to Jesse Boot. And in fact, was doing a lot of the shop fitting for them in those early days. But there was a greater and greater call as a general dealer to clear houses for people, to provide sufficient funding for their funeral following the death. And Arthur William, together with his son Harold, in 1907 decided that it would probably be a good idea to, instead of simply giving the funding, it would be better to provide the funeral which would enable them to give better value to people. So they started, in exchange for the contents of a house, providing a funeral. And that was really the start of our funeral business.
Meanwhile, on the other side of Nottingham, the big chimney.
When you go to a hospital and you're going for the first time and you're looking for the mortuary, the tip is head for the chimney, because normally the mortuary and the boiler house and the linen services are all close to one another.
Just backing up into the car park.
Let's get ourselves under this canopy, which gives a little bit of cover. So again, it just gives that little bit of privacy, a little bit of protection, and again, it's about considering the dignity of the deceased.
Is this area reserved for you?
It is. So you'll see the hashes on the floor. The car next to us is the mortuary technician, but this area is reserved for us. And the fencing and the wall down the side just give that little bit of privacy so that we can go about our business without disturbing anybody else who's around. Morning.
Morning.
How are you?
I'm all right, thank you.
Amanda Wiles, the City Hospital Mortuary. How do you do? I'm Alan D, BBC
Hello.
Radio. Hello. Excellent.
Hiya.
Just entered the mortuary now, going through the green plastic curtains, and both sides are refrigerators
Yes.
with the bodies inside, numbered up to...
Up to 72 in here.
Right.
The deceased will be wrapped in a hospital sheet, wearing a hospital shroud, and the deceased should have one tag on a wrist and one tag on an ankle. So always two tags on a body, and that will show the patient's name and address.
But before we could get to any of the bodies, there's paperwork to be dealt with.
Okay, right.
Okay.
So you've come for 5 patients, and we'll check the identification and the home addresses against your paperwork. We won't read out any deceased name or home addresses or anything
Thank you.
like that for client confidentiality.
Yeah.
So we have this patient,
Yeah.
that address.
Lovely.
This patient has a full set of dentures.
Okay.
So that one is for you to sign. Just
Thank
there
you.
and there.
Amanda, these are release forms.
Yes.
You use in hospital the term patient.
Yes.
At this stage, the person that's leaving the hospital
Yeah.
is a patient.
We don't call them deceased. Well, I don't. To me, they're a patient until they go into the care of the funeral directors. They're a patient when they come into the hospital. They're a patient when they get released.
Each body has to be signed for,
Where are you?
as does any jewellery and personal effects.
Sign for the dentures as well.
Yeah, they're in there for me.
These are checks that will be carried out at every stage of the body's journey.
Okay. That's your
Wonderful.
paperwork.
Thank
and
you.
These are your 4 cremation forms.
Yeah,
And
that
one is
one's
a
a
burial,
burial.
so you've got no paperwork.
Thank you very much.
No problem.
So you'll see while we've been in the office, Gary's brought everything in and set up the first stretcher.
So we're now going to get some patients out. So we'll get some gloves on. So this is an electric trolley. So just try and stay out of my way because I don't want to run your toes over.
The first time I actually saw a deceased person, I do remember that. I would have been 10 at the time.
I remember very clearly the first time that I saw a body.
I actually think I was about 4 years old. That's quite unusual, but my mother was taking her driving test, I think, and I was being looked after by my father.
We walked into the mortuary not knowing that the door of the cold room would be open because there was somebody else in there dealing with preparation, and I walked in on a deceased.
This is that patient.
For each patient, Amanda and Matthew lift the white hospital sheet covering the body,
So that person
Yeah.
of that home address.
Yeah.
checking and rechecking the identity, and making sure that all the personal effects are properly accounted for.
No valuables.
No valuables on that hand. No valuables on that hand.
They're clearly used to this.
Own dentures. Own teeth, should I say. No hearing aids.
Lovely. Thank you.
But for me, the grey, drained faces and lifeless bodies are disconcerting.
Today, some 25 years on, I can remember so clearly that being the first time that I'd seen a dead body in front of me.
And I knew that that person wasn't asleep. I knew whatever dead was, that person was dead.
Do you still remember what that felt like?
Yes, I do. It definitely had an impact upon me. How I would describe that impact, I don't know. Whether it was just the impact of growing up, or whether it was just an impact of the reality, or even that life doesn't go on forever.
This body's wrapped in a hospital sheet, so we're going to take the body in the sheet, and Gary and I will lift and slide. And then the elasticated covers that we have, thank you, are pulled over, and they cover the entire stretcher and the body, so that when we come out of the door of the mortuary, no one can see anything on the stretcher. You may have noted that at all times the deceased is travelling feet first, and whenever we transfer a body, we transfer them feet first.
Is there a reason for that?
I should have known you'd ask me that question by giving you that information. I'm not entirely sure what the logic behind it is, other than perhaps that feels the most natural way to move, but we always do that, and bodies are always transferred feet first and whenever possible. We found that interesting.
It's not easy, because I'm looking at a colour of face and hands that I just would never see. And I just imagine them just weeks or months earlier standing at the bus stop, talking, reading the paper, and then seeing them horizontal, no longer alive. It's sad, very sad.
If that were your or my grandma, who'd, as you say, a week earlier been at the bus stop, we wouldn't want to see them at this stage. But part of what we do, we're protecting them from that. And to see the body in this real stark state of death, as you say, horizontally here in this mortuary, with the colour drained from them, I think is probably not helpful for most people.
Oh, I do need you to do one thing for me before you leave. You have a deceased baby with us.
Gary's just said.
Yes.
So he's going to ring Matt now.
Well, they want us to, so you can identify the baby now.
Yeah.
So that the Muslim lady can come and wrap the baby, which is tradition.
The baby is in that fridge. Do you mind if I step back? I
Yes,
don't
of
really
course.
want to.
No, that's completely fine.
That's absolutely fine.
I wasn't prepared for that. But in fairness, it's not my job. It's Matthew's.
You certainly do have to become used to it, but you must never become numb to it.
There are two types of people. There are people who are like a sponge and absorb everything. And there are people that are able to be like a bat, bounce a ball off. They hear what's happening, they see what's happening, but they're able to deal with it. And the way they often deal with it is by being able to give help to others rather than absorbing somebody else's problem. That's what we try to get the staff to do. We clearly could not have our staff being involved with several funerals a day and them taking on board all that grief.
If you become numb to it and the deceased's, the bodies become just numbers or whatever, then you lose your compassion, and families would see straight through that.
What is the body?
There's something I've never really visited, isn't there? Never really visited.
In my mind, it is only the shell, it is only the case, but it's been the living and breathing representation of that person for however many years.
I suppose I just accept what other people believe in that respect. If other people believe the spirit is still there, then that's fine. And if they don't, that's equally fine. Because that doesn't really matter to me. What matters to me is that that body is treated with respect. Spirit or no spirit, family or no family, doesn't matter. That body is treated with respect, and that is so important.
It's so important and it's so precious to a family, and it must be treated with such care and such dignity and such respect. We can never ever play that down because it is so vital.
Part of that respect is to give the body a presentable appearance, and to achieve that often requires an invasive procedure, embalming.
In 3 words, embalming is preservation, sanitation and presentation.
I'm with Jackie in the company mortuary
Right, you see in here,
with embalmer Sally Sharp.
so Sally is just dressing this gentleman that she has embalmed this morning.
He's an elderly gentleman.
I'll tell you how old he is. He's 46 years old.
It's 46. I would not know. I suppose I have not got too close at the moment, but also the only movement is the movement of Sally when she is positioning the body.
She was just manipulating his features so that he had a nice exposed expression.
And I must say, just being in this room, I suppose I anticipated, you have got a preconceived idea of what it may be like, and I was thinking it might be cold or I might smell sort of formaldehyde or something, but it doesn't feel like that at all. It's room temperature. I can't smell anything that
It's quite strict regulations with regard to the exchanges of air, so you generally wouldn't get that sort of smell.
Yeah.
And cleanliness as well is really important in a mortuary setting. Everything has to be clean, sterile.
Do you find it upsetting?
A few cases, but certain things you have to do put to the back of your mind while you're doing your job, and walk away from it at the end of the day and come back the next day fresh and ready to do it all again.
Obviously, I'm looking at the man that you just embalmed, and there's a white sheet covering him, but at the end of the white sheet are two black shoes just sticking out.
Poignant, isn't it?
Just still.
Serene.
The preparation of the body is one aspect of what funeral directors do. Providing a service to the surviving family is another. And that is much more public. Even in the car showroom, Nigel has framed examples of that.
This would be about 1912, when we'd got funeral carriage proprietor, complete undertaker, funerals with taste, respect and economy.
Certainly looking at those early days, that kind of sense of promotion and almost showmanship in a way. Is look at us, we are A.W. Lim, we can do all of this. Not quite Arthur Daly, perhaps Alan Sugar.
In my grandfather's day, he was very competitive with Bamford's, and really they were the two firms that were growing and always trying to really outdo each other. If we were quiet, my grandfather would get some flowers, an empty coffin, put it on the hearse, and deliberately go and drive past Bamford's premises twice in the day to make Mr. Bamford feel that Mr. Lim was very busy. Now, we're not sure how often Mr. Bamford did the same to Mr. Lim, but this was part of their competitive edge and the way they had their showmanship.
And that showmanship is perhaps best manifested by the very traditional uniform of the funeral directors. Across the courtyard, behind the head office and above the stonemason's workshop with its loud intermittent ventilator are the changing rooms. I'm with Matthew again. OK, so we've come into the locker room. Have you got your own?
Yes, so
locker?
All my clothing is in here. A pair of grey pinstripe trousers, complete with red braces, a double-breasted waistcoat, tailcoat, walking cane with a silver top, and then inside the box here I have silk top hat, 70 or 80 years old, quite a high top hat with a good shape, and a single black cotton glove. I don't wear the gloves, I just carry them, and if I have two I'm more likely to lose one, so I only carry one. All just for look, I suppose, really.
And now, the transformation.
Time to get changed.
Another transformation in the past year has been that of Matthew becoming the managing director. Following in the footsteps of his father, his grandfather, his great-grandfather and his great-great-grandfather. But Matthew has an older sister, Chloe, who has herself worked with the firm until quite recently, when she stopped to have children.
Chloe's my big little sister.
Yeah.
So who joined the family business first? Who was the first sort of employee of your parents?
I think that you did the first work there.
Can you remember what your first staff number was when you went onto the payroll?
2034.
You see, I must have been on the payroll before you then,
You
because
were,
I was
2017. How sad is that?
Did you see him as sort of managing director material?
We actually had a conversation with advisors, and both of us were of the opinion that it wasn't what I wanted with my work-life balance, and it was what you wanted.
I mean, I think that conversation must have been just after my 25th birthday.
Yeah, I think it was around that time, yeah.
And you're quite right, we sat together and had that conversation, and fortunately we both see ourselves as having different aspirations and different strengths, and I think we complement one another.
Yeah.
So often in a family business, talent is not able to come forward for two reasons. Either people are brought into the business who have no outside or background knowledge and are not actually the right person to be running the business, or family are brought into the business who are very capable, who are well qualified, and then they're not allowed to make a decision until they're at an age when they'll actually pass the prime, because you sit in position too long.
He's been the managing director for about 30 years and has guided the business through great expansion, great changes.
It had been my intention to change what I was doing when I was 60. Regrettably, 4 weeks before I was 60, I was diagnosed with cancer, and that meant I had to have an operation and was away. And it's very much more difficult to give things up when you're forced to do so. So I made the decision to do a temporary appointment to put Matthew from the Next Generation to come in as acting managing director. But you can't do it unless you really do it. You've got to let go. You've got to let somebody else be in charge.
And so, a year on, Matthew has been confirmed in his role.
I am managing director now. I've been appointed. Although I'm not sure that Companies House know yet, but I have been appointed.
Time for me now to go with the managing director to one of their local branch offices to collect the coffin for this afternoon's funeral. For its final journey, the deceased will travel in one of the firm's many luxury vehicles. Hello, Tony. I'm Alan. How do you do? Nice to meet you too. How are you?
Oh, very well.
I love the sounds. This is sort of so discreet. You can hear locks click. I think it's just the solidity of a Rolls Royce. A bit different to my Vauxhall Zafira, I tell you.
But the fuel bill's different as well. This car is the best equipped form of transport to take passengers in and cocoon them from the outside world. At the stage that we're driving to a funeral to attend a service, we want to be taking every piece of worry and stress out of that client's mind and out of their world, I suppose. And by sitting here in this Rolls Royce, as you say, with the smell of leather and the wood around you and the double glazed windows, it's a quiet and safe place to be. And it should give the client the opportunity then to think about nothing other than the funeral without being worried or disturbed by anything else.
How long have you had this branch?
We bought this office with a group of companies in 1994. Some of the staff used to tease the staff that we inherited with this company. The joke used to be that for Matthew's 12th birthday he asked for a cowboy outfit and his dad bought Radcliffe and District. Right.
Brilliant.
We do have a sense of humour.
Yeah.
So a bit of a strange one, but we have one nonetheless.
The office here is barely distinguishable from the residential houses around it, and the coffin waiting for us is in what would have been the garage at the back.
So, I think Eugene, you saw the watch that we've removed.
Okay, yeah.
And left with her was the teddy bear and the Bible.
Bible, yeah.
Okay, thank you. What number are you?
2167.
Once more, and now for the final time, everything is checked and signed off before the coffin is sealed.
So, this identity tag on the foot of the coffin refers to the specific deceased, gives us the instructions about the jewellery. So you'll notice that both Eugene and I checked the identity of the lady, checked her name and her address, and we're both now signing on here with our names and our staff numbers to say that this person is the person it should be, and to say that the jewellery's been dealt with in the correct manner. So I'm just making a note that the watch, which is in the yellow metal, has been removed, and that the teddy bear and the Bible have stayed with her. That ticket's perforated, so once the coffin is loaded onto the hearse, it's removed. Not before, because for argument's sake, if we did all this, said we were 5 minutes early and wandered outside, and came back in and for some unknown reason walked into the wrong room and took the wrong coffin out, we could potentially be down with the wrong coffin. It sounds highly unlikely, but we want to have a foolproof system. So when this coffin's loaded onto the hearse, at that stage and that stage only, will that ticket be removed? And my final check as a funeral director as I leave here is that this deceased, with these jewellery instructions, is who we're taking with us on the funeral.
Once the body's on board the hearse, the team and the cortege will collect the family before making its way to the crematorium.
Okay. Hat on, cane and glove in hand, just my last bits of paperwork to go into the hearse, and then we will leave here from the office in the proper manner. So I will walk in front, we'll stop the traffic, and we'll have a very slow walk out of the village, and everything, even though we're not being watched at this stage, is done with the ceremony and with the gravitas that it deserves, really.
And so the body embarks on its final journey. Matthew leads the cortege away from the office, glove and cane in hand, the slow, purposeful footstep. It strikes me that Matthew doesn't look any different from those black and white photographs of his great-great-grandfather, Arthur William Lymm. Over 100 years on, Matthew is part of an industry which offers its clients a multitude of choices: prepayment plans, eco-friendly funerals, bespoke coffins, caskets and urns. And it's a business that Matthew himself has plans to further expand. But at its heart, it's an industry that's always dealt with the elements of death that we'd rather not know about: the collection and preparation of dead bodies. This service, with Matthew leading the hearse up to the Wilford Hill Crematorium Chapel, is not for the dead, it's for the living. It is important to say goodbye, to remember the departed, and to give those left behind a moment of reflection before life moves on.
This edition of Lives in a Landscape was presented by Alan Dean, and the producer was Paul Kobrak. And if you want to hear more programmes from this or earlier series, simply go to the Lives in a Landscape pages on the BBC Radio 4 website.